lot is happening on this. Public safety experts say the Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting, as bad as it was, could have been a lot worse.
Let's bring in Mark Nouveau. He's a former Fremont Fire Battalion chief, a former coordinator for FEMA. Thanks for being with us this morning. You talk about increasing security at festivals such as the Gilroy Garlic Festival. Police say this gunman cut a hole through the fence. What can you do to prevent something like this?
I don't know if you can prevent it. You know, we heard last night that one of the Gilroy City Council members said this was the first year they started wanding people and go through purses. So they even stepped up the security, and still we ended up in a situation like this. You know, thankfully there were police officers that patrol that area along with fire department medics in case something happens. And this is one of those instances where it was, you know, very, very nice to have them there.
Mark, the other part of the story people are talking about, the death of the little boy who was shot. And there are other story aspects to this involving his family, his mother. What happened?
Yeah, it sounds like what we're hearing this morning is that the mother's in an induced coma because of her injuries. And you think about this, you know, it's a fair. You're with your family. He was with his grandmother and his mother at the bounce house. And so one of the victims is a 6-year-old boy, Stephen Romero. And I mean, when you think about that, you want to go with your family. Where do you go? To a fair, cotton candy, you know, carnival rides, and here this young man's not going to be going home.
Wow.
We know
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, back to the police response. We've been sharing videos that people at the festival were taking as they were running for their lives. Can you talk a little bit about the response by the public, and also perhaps more importantly, by the officers who were already there? They engaged the gunman within a minute.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see over the next few days unfolding here is some very heroic actions by the police officers, because paint the picture that you've got, you know, thousands of people in a gourmet alley, the food alley, and you're wrapping up a long day's shift, and now all of a sudden here comes a perpetrator through the fence with, you know, a high-powered semi-automatic rifle starting to shoot people. You have a moment's notice. You've got to be able to make a determination. You've got to be able to return fire, and all within a very small distance. There are bystanders, there are vendors, there are volunteers. So as you can see, that's a very difficult thing for somebody to do. Thankfully, he was there and proficient at what he needed to do.
We see people running, we see people taking cover. In some of these videos, we actually hear a pause, and then we hear more gunfire. How do you read that? Yeah, well, you can hear from the Twitter feeds, there's no question that people thought it was fireworks initially, but then seconds later you can hear multiple rounds being fired. Now, all of this taking place within a minute. You know, we have, what, 15 people were injured, 4 fatalities out of within a minute's period of time. Thankfully, the officer was there. Can we imagine what it would have been like had the officer not been there?
Yeah, and you think about the fact they stopped it quickly.
Absolutely.
And what could have been the aftermath.
Yes, not only that, but they were able to get the shooting victims to a hospital fairly quickly. St. Louis Hospital is very close to that, so they had, I think, 8 folks that were actually transported to St. Louis, and 2 or 3 gunshot victims were airlifted over to Valley Medical because they needed special care. So it seems as though the response, not only in apprehending and securing the facility, but treating the victims, was very apropos.
Talk briefly about what's happening as we're talking now. The police have swarmed into a neighborhood, and they're moving into a house, and we're getting information about identifying a possible suspect.
Yeah, I think once they found out that they knew who that suspect was, they were, even as of last night, they were processing through the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I think they're also going through social media feeds, cell phone records, etc., trying to figure out who this individual affiliated with to make sure this isn't a part of a larger plot. We're hoping that all this is just somebody disgruntled, took out, unfortunately, you know, devastating a situation, but they're concerned that this is not something of a larger scale terrorism incident.
Would you call this terrorism?
I think based upon what we saw in terms of fatigues, planning, premeditated, cutting the fence, you know, circumventing security, etc., you have to go into this at least thinking that. And we know, you know, in this country, most damage is done from homegrown terrorists. So when we see this individual lone person gunman, we're hoping that's all that is one individual. But the concern being, is this part of a larger plot? And that's why they want to move quickly. quickly and find out what's going on.
Talk briefly about the future of events like this, festivals like this all over the country. Can they ever be the same again?
I don't know. You know, we saw, what, 2 weeks ago in the shopping mall, a gunfight in Tanforan Park. Now we're seeing it at a fair. I'm not sure what the future looks like. Driving in, I saw a headline that said something to the effect, mass shootings as the new normal. I hope that's not the case, that it's ever a new normal for us. Certainly they're going to have to take more precautions next time around, but how do you know, when somebody's set on doing something like this, how do you prevent it?
Yes.
Mark Nouveau, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in later hours of Mornings on 2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.